Hello, welcome to the Manual Handling Collective. I'm your host, Simone Hepburn. I'm a physio and manual handling educator, and I'm passionate about injury prevention. This is a podcast where I speak frankly with the brain's trust of manual handling and other amazing industry leaders in and around the occupational health and wellness community. You get to meet them, you get to be inspired, you get to learn from their stories, and you get to stay up to date with the latest and greatest in manual handling and wellness. So let's crack on. Welcome to another episode of the Manual Handling Collective. And today, as our guest, we have Pippa Wright. Welcome, Pippa.
Lovely to be here.
We've just spent a few moments getting all our technology sorted, and we can see Pippa at home there in her home office, in her own territory. I have Pippa's bio in front of me, for those who don't know Pippa already, and it's very extensive. I'm going to have to break it down into little parts to tell you about Pippa. She has a background as a registered nurse and multiple qualifications and certifications and memberships and associations that I'm going to dive into with her throughout this chat. She's best known perhaps in Australia as the chair of the Australian Association of the Manual Handling of People, the face of the AAMHP, and the conference queen. So what better person to have on the Manual Handling Collective? And we're lucky to have your brains in the brain's trust of manual handling, Pippa. I will get to other parts of your bio as we get going, because you've got a lot of other interesting roles that I think people would really like to hear about. My first question, though, is about your journey. So can you tell us a bit about why the move from nursing into OH&S, and then secondly, what happened from there with your career over the years to bring you to where you are now?
Gosh. Well, in all fairness, I don't think my nursing has come to an end, basically because it's been such an integral part of the journey. And I remain registered, of course, because I still go in and do clinical assessments, etc. But initially, I always had a passion for change. I guess you could call me, or my family always called me, the Mrs. Fix-It. So basically, I had a passion for learning more to be able to fix what was wrong. After all my postgraduates and so forth and having the children, I went to a private hospital that's local to me and working in intensive care or theatre, sort of between the two. And my director actually was the one who came to me and said, look, we've just been to this conference and apparently there's this thing called OH&S. And this is going back 25 years.
Yeah.
I have been nursing for 45 years, so do the math. But basically, from that point on, within 2 years, we'd achieved safety map, and we'd also done our first accreditation of the hospital. Then I was headhunted to the Northwest Healthcare Network, and from then on, it just sort of went prajam. So, yeah. So
and now you have for the last 22 years, your own consultancy around injury prevention. Let me get the name right.
Preventative Injury Planning Strategies Proprietary Limited.
It's a long bio.
I've got to. Yeah, people call it PIPS.
PIPS. That's perfect for you.
Yeah, it started basically sitting around a table with the directors of a couple of private hospitals attached to a large city hospital. And we were sitting and having lunch, basically, and they were asking me to help them. And I said, how can I help you when I've got 50 sites that I'm responsible for workplace health and safety? Wow. And they said, it's easy. Go out on your own. They'll kill you. And they were right.
Oh, very good.
So we wrote down, and she said, everybody knows you as PIPS, so let's think of a name, and that's how it started.
Wow, yeah, it's a good story. So, and how about the story behind, I'm sure there's another story. I'm sure there's many stories. Becoming the chair of the AAMHP, Australian Association of Manual Handling of People. How did that come about? How long's that been going? And can you give maybe some newcomers, listeners, a bit of a background on that if they're not
Well, in
members
actual,
already? Or
well, as of last month, basically, Tony Johnson is now back to or being the chair
see,
because I found that 10 years was kind of long enough. But it all started when I joined the committee at the South Australian first inaugural conference,
how
and
long
thought
ago? How long ago was the first conference
20
now?
years, love, 20
Wow,
years.
wow, that's
So
so cool.
yeah, so I had been delving into manual handling for some time, but usually with Pam Pryor, who was one of my mentors for workplace health and safety or occupational health and safety then, and she had told me that there was a conference going on in Adelaide around manual handling. And Mard Best, who was my actual trainer and another mentor in manutention, she sort of said, you must come along and have a look. She was working with WorkSafe by that time. And so I went along and I thought, hey, there's all these like-minded people just like me
Fabulous.
who are interested in manual handling. And so I joined the committee. Long story short, when it went to Brisbane, then it went to Melbourne, which I was the organiser of the Melbourne conference. And literally that was in 2008. And basically was sort of nominated as vice chair at that time. Sarah Warren was the chair. And literally from that point on, I kept trying to stay in the background and just be a committee member. And vice chair was fine. And then after Sydney, then we went on to New Zealand, and then I basically ended up in the chair after that and
Very
have been
good.
there ever since. So until last month.
Oh, well, congratulations, Tony Johnson, if he's listening. But 10 years is a good innings there. I remember, I don't know if you remember when we first met, but I remember we first met at the Brisbane conference. That was my first conference in 2012 with AAMHP.
Right.
And
Yeah.
I got a real sense at that very first conference of your inclusive vibe. So I remember when I first arrived, I didn't know many people, and you were straight up to me and very welcoming and
Oh,
very
good.
kind and inclusive. So yeah, so you've done a good job in bringing people together and actually joining that association and going on to the conferences has been part of my inspiration for doing these podcasts and bringing people together, because I think that really helped me in my career to start networking and knowing who's who. And without that network, I would have struggled in isolation in my job. So thank you for all your years of hard work.
Well, I don't think I should sort of wear that hat alone. There's a whole committee behind,
Yeah.
that wears that, with Tony and Hal Robertson, of course, and Sarah Warren and a few others that basically have kept the committee sort of pushing along.
Going.
I guess I probably just have the loudest voice sometimes, but and in my eyes, it was very important to gather up the nurses, the physios, anybody within allied health. And also the medical guys. So trying to get a cohesive group of people who had the same interests at heart. And that was including the return to work people as well, because it all went hand in hand.
Overlap.
Yeah, that's right. So I'm glad you felt like that, because that's exactly what we want for the membership and the association.
Yeah. So you do a lot of PD, I can see from your extensive bio. Let's talk a bit more about professional development, because the conferences are one thing. How else do you keep up to date? What's your other go-tos? What sources of information? Where do you go?
I started off. I actually felt that I had to go overseas to get more of an understanding of how things were running, because once I heard about the National Back Exchange
in the UK.
The UK, yes. And I met some amazing people, and I brought them all over to talk at the Melbourne conference, the first Melbourne conference. And that was probably the highlight, because, again, like-minded people, but people who had moved so much further into the future with what they were doing, and just the the cohesiveness between suppliers and their association, the fact that they were all writing something and they're all getting involved in things. And I met other people from around the world, and it showed me that Australia is not on their own, and that other countries had been doing this journey for some time, particularly the UK. So I felt blessed that I could sort of bring them up to speed and say, well, okay, you've been going this long, but this is how long we've been going. We're already at this point. So, but we want to jump ahead. So, and the same goes with America. I went to a few of their conferences. It was very interesting, but, you know, you move forward and you learn all different ways. So,
yeah. And you just mentioned America. I know they have their own journal as well, the International Journal. Well, not theirs. They're calling it International Journal of Safe Patient Handling and Mobility. And they have their own.
It only went to international last year.
It did it. It used to be American.
Yes, it was the American Journal. Yes.
And they also are fairly advanced in their credentialing, because you've got that international certification as safe patient handling professional.
Yes.
What?
I'm about the only one.
I was going to say, can you explain to us a bit about what they do in America to certify safe patient handling professionals, and what's the state of play at the moment in Australia? Because you also have some other certifications, OHS professional with the Australian Institute of Safety, and a chartered fellow of the Australian Institute of Health and Safety. Yeah.
Well, I mean, you know, I have two arms basically. I'm a multitasker, and workplace health and safety is one, and I became a fellow of the Institute some years ago when basically they brought in a situation where you had to go through a rigorous sort of review, you had to write a paper, you had to answer exams, etc., etc. And so that was the process that we started here in Australia, because I was on that committee from probably the first time I went to my first OH&S class and joined them, and they really helped. But in relation to manual handling, America was the only one that was doing a certification process. And they started that process because they had a lot of people out there that were trying or saying that they could teach you manual handling, but it really didn't have the stamina, or they didn't have the background or the expertise to be able to run that. And so when I was over in America the first time, I was approached and asked if I would like to be the first Australian to join. They had a few people from the United Kingdom. They had one or two people from Europe, and so they were wanting to globally increase their membership, I suppose, and also to make it an international certification. So I was very rigorously reviewed, judged by my peers, watched while I was training, read all my papers, read all my journals, and basically thoroughly looked over my programs, even to the point of invoicing, billing, finance, the whole thing.
Wow.
So it was a very, a big issue. There's 10 criteria that you need to meet. And I was very pleased when they wrote back and said, gosh, you're the first person to pass all 10 criteria. And I said, oh, that's just because I'm really good at writing stuff.
Submissions.
And basically was certified. And then I tried to encourage the rest of the Australian group to go down that path. But I guess when they started looking at the 10 criteria, they were maybe a little bit off-put. But as I kept saying, it's not as hard as it sounds. I got involved in the international exam, so we made it a generic issue rather than an Americanized exam. But the thing is in America, you need that credentialing for both safety and for manual handling to be able to get a job. Here,
I see.
Not so much.
Not in that position, I see.
No. And I would like it to be that way because, look, every now and again I'm asked to review a program that somebody has been running, and there are some dodgy characters out there. I hate to say it, but there are. And, just because you're an RTO doesn't mean that your person's teaching the program have the right credentialing to run the program. And that's
sure.
no dispersion on RTOs. It's simply a fact. And so I would like to see some sort of credentialing here in Australia, but it takes a lot of effort and a lot of time to be able to build something like that. And the executive of AMP just didn't have that time because we're all volunteers, whereas in the States they are paid members.
Wow.
Paid executive, the same as in UK, they're paid executive.
Yeah.
Haynes Medical Australia are innately curious, solution-focused and always keen to share expert insights on keeping staff and patients safe. That's why today's Manual Handling Collective podcast is proudly brought to you by Haynes Medical Australia.
I really like that international perspective that you bring. Thank you. Leads me to my next question, which you've kind of answered, is about the future. So if I had a crystal ball and you were to look into the future, so a couple of questions. One, the future of the manual handling community as a profession, and you've kind of answered that with your idea about credentialing. The other one is, the future with Pippa, and you've kind of answered that because you handed the chair over to Tony Johnson.
I will remain as the conference organiser for a couple of years at least. So.
Oh, good. So that's another question. What's the future for you, and just anything else for the AAMHP or the industry?
Look, the whole
Big
world
question.
is a little bit in sort of limbo at this point in time. The conferences will go ahead every 2 years, at least for the next 2 conferences, because I will maintain a role in assisting that. But after that, I've got to hand the gauntlet to a younger, more robust group, because, I'm getting towards retirement. And in the perfect world, I would still have a hand in teaching and in, assessing clients within their homes or within the hospitals or aged care environments, because that's what I love to do, to make it better for them and to fix the problems. Yeah. However, it does come down to, I can't be the only voice. There are other people behind the scenes, but somebody else, younger people have to come and bring new blood to it, new ideas, new IT, all that sort of thing. I'm self-taught computer girl who has no idea about IT. Exactly. And yet
podcasts,
last year,
for example.
Exactly. Or e-learning programs where you're trying to animate it so that people get engaged. I am an old-fashioned girl who loves face-to-face. So, although this is face-to-face, sort of.
This is almost like we're having a coffee together.
We are having a coffee, love. Yeah, see?
Okay, cheers. So you kind of did a nice lead into my other question, which was about conferences. I know you've been involved in so many and organised so many. Do you have some advice for people to get the most out of a conference? What would you say to people who might be attending for the first time?
You've got to make it balanced, inclusive, and ensure that people are aware that they're not on their own. And, when you talked before about being inclusive, that kind of started when I went to America for the first time and stood around like a shag on a rock, basically thinking,
where do I fit in?
Where do I fit in?
Yeah.
Because, I'm just that Aussie girl who's sort of turned up. She's going to speak a couple of times, but really, and that was actually at Chicago with the American Society of Safety Engineers. And, they didn't have anything for the international guests. You just sort of were thrown in there and, work it out yourself. So I came back and thought, well, one of the things we will do is make sure that we have keynote speakers, international guests, and the committee get together before the conference even starts, so that we could network, and so they felt like they always had a face they could go to. And then for the newbies, we make sure that they're tagged and we know who they are, and we make sure that they can be, sort of included in all the groups, but mainly in the network. And the other key factor is the networking functions have to be more than just sit-down dinners, because sit-down dinners, people don't get off their table, they don't talk. So you've got to have that inclusive networking, although some people say that the cocktail hour doesn't work because there's not enough seats. So you're always trying to please everybody in what you have. A combination of workshops, presentations, your keynotes, but also giving the newbie a go to be able to present in a concurrent session so that they get a flair for, do they want to present or don't they, and holding their hand a bit if they need it, while they do present, because everybody's got a story to tell.
Yeah. So from what advice would you give from the perspective of an attendee if they were coming to a conference? How would they as an attendee or a member get the most out of their time?
Attend everything, work out their schedule in advance if they can.
I like to highlight the program.
Highlight what they want to go, but also making sure that you don't lock them in, that they have to go to that. Because if, say, there's a keynote speaker that's doing something else, they might think, well, gee, I really want to hear them again. Or there'll be a particular stream, bariatrics, or there'll be something on behavioural management, etc. So you need to make sure that there's different categories that they can wander into quite happily, and making sure that there's enough time in between the getting from one place to another. So when I talk to people about scheduling, then they really do need to make sure that I'm focused on what I want to hear, but golly, if something else comes up that I really want to hear, can I swap it around? And that's the same with the workshops.
Can you give us a sneak peek into September in Adelaide with the AAMHP? And
yes,
what hot topics could people expect?
Well,
Don't have to give it all away.
No, I won't give it all away. But basically, we're going to talk about the integration of more than just manual handling. You would know yourself that manual handling isn't just how we move people, but it's also the holistic picture of care. From pressure care to prevention of skin tears and prevention of falls. So we want to marry all those up rather than having little silos that everything gets pigeonholed into a falls management conference or a pressure area care. And this will help the suppliers too, because we will be asking them to think outside the box in relation to what they bring, so that we can tie all of this in together and be very integrated in how we deal with a person. Because with consumer focused care now, we have to think more than just, okay, I'm going to put a picture up that says this is a 2-person handling client. It has to be more about the actual safe operating procedures for this specific client to deal with the falls aspect, to deal with the skin tear aspect, to deal with the pressure care problems, and also the behaviour.
So the unique combination of comorbidities and environment that are going on around them.
Absolutely, yes.
So
and
complex.
Put a bit of the design in there, put a bit of, the new builds and how some people are doing it right and some people are perhaps doing it wrong in relation to design. But we have a couple of international speakers that will go into that, and then we have a lot of national speakers who will sort of give case studies. So, I think we've got a pretty diverse sort of program sort of coming up, and a number of workshops. So
look forward to it.
I think everybody will keen to think that I am not speaking this year because I'm running it solely. So I will not get a chance. So I'm really pleased that other people have come to the party with workshops and so forth. And it should be fantastic. Fantastic it will be. And the networking, that's a surprise. I'm not telling you that yet.
Oh.
The function.
Mind boggles. Okay. I'm just imagining South Australian red wine. That's all I think you're talking about. But
yes, most definitely. And a lot of breweries they've got now.
Oh, do they?
Yeah.
You mentioned networking, and I've got a couple of questions around networking. I work with some students at the local university here on the Gold Coast, and I don't think a lot of young professionals or early career professionals appreciate the power of networking
No,
when you get
they
into
don't.
the workforce and all the wonderful benefits it can bring. Can you put it in your own words what you think the power of networking, you know, people all around the world, Pippa, why is networking helpful, and do you have any tips for young career professionals about how to network? I think they think it's a foreign concept, you know, networking. They don't entirely understand what to do and what it is.
I think they tend to think that networking is simply, you know, texting lots and lots of people. But
adding a friend on Facebook.
Facebook, yes. But it's so much more than that. It's such a journey of learning when you can talk and gain insight from other people around the world and realise that, you know, it doesn't matter what country you're in, we've all got the same questions, the same problems, and by talking about them and setting up little families. And look, that may stem from the fact that when I was nursing, we all had to live in the nursing home and not nursing home, sorry, nurses' home.
Nurses' quarters.
Yes, quarters, that's it. And you bonded with people, and they were friendships for life that we still get together and discuss what we're doing. And I think every time you take a niche in your career, you know, whether it be workplace health and safety or whether it be quality or whether it be manual handling, you build a friendship group and a group of people that you can sit down at any time and have a discussion and gain answers and come up with ideas and thinking, gosh, I hadn't thought of that. I'm going to try that. And somebody else listening to what you've said. And some people often say at the conferences even, look, oh, there's nothing new. I haven't heard anything new. And I said, but the most important thing is it still all relevant to what you're doing? And they say, well, of course it is. Well, there you go. You're still in there. You're still up to date. And that's why we network together.
That's the learning.
That's right. So developing those groups where you are all like-minded and have a passion for, as I say, fixing things, you can't beat the networking sessions. That is an integral part of the conferences and even the small local groups. We've got a lot of rural groups around Victoria and New South Wales, Queensland, where they get together, and it might even only be on Skype or it might be some sort of, you know, phone-in. But basically they do get together to talk about problems. The discussion forum on AMP, for example, you know, people often say, I'm just talking to the Brains Trust. Well, that's great. Now, it sometimes goes quiet, but generally it arcs up people's thoughts, and every now and again you'll get something in there from somebody who, gosh, you know, haven't heard from them for a while, and all of a sudden they pop up, and, you know, if you've got something to say, you can say it. Yep. I just think it's good.
Yeah, I agree. Two heads are always better than one. So for new people at the conference who arrive, do you have any tips for them on how to get around and get to know people?
Talk.
Talk 101.
Yeah, I this time round we will be having, and I'm still working on it, but we will be having some little, not passports or games or things like that, but we will be having some discussion forums whereby people have to make sure they go to a particular supplier and gain knowledge on a particular issue and then be able to come back and expand upon it. Okay. And those who have found, you know, the thing that is going to make their life better and more approachable within their workplace can, you know, sort of comment on that. So there's a number of different things that we're going to do. Yeah. The innovations will go ahead. So we'll obviously tell all the all the attendees to go around and look at the innovations and judge, and we'll sort of have that on day 3, early in day 3, so that it does get the song and dance that it needs. In the past, it's been put at the end, and I think we need to do it earlier. We'll also be running the AMP meeting much earlier, the AGM, and invite everybody and anybody to it so that they can have their say or at least meet other people. But generally, my advice is attend everything, go to every session, and just open a conversation.
And you mentioned talk to the suppliers as well, and the
Absolutely.
evening events.
The suppliers are an integral part of the conference. Without them, the conference won't go ahead. And we have a great selection of people that have become followers of the conference now, and some new ones that have just come into the market. And we need those. So play with the stuff. And sometimes even if you don't know anybody and you start playing with a piece of equipment at a supplier's table,
someone will
basically
come up and join in.
Someone will come up, join in the conversation, and it's kind of like, there's this running commentary and everybody gets involved, and the next time you go to somewhere else, you'll meet another person or there'll be a face that you remember. So
and I've come back from conferences and got a couple of people's email addresses who we had something to share. We worked out, I'll send you this, and she was going to send me something else, and then we've stayed in touch over the years, and every now and again, if I have a problem or she has problems, she'll email me and say, what do you guys do about this at your hospital?
Yes. Yeah. And that's how it should be, because I get a little bit annoyed when people think that what they're doing is secret business and you'll only hear about it if you pay me for it. And I think, I've been giving away my stuff for years and years and years, and I'm very blessed. I've never had to advertise. I've always been in work as much as I want, and consequently always kept the friendships and sharing of knowledge going. And I think that's how it should be.
The more you give, the more you get back, sort of
I
philosophy.
think so, yeah. And it's not, I hate to say it, but it's not rocket science. It's about coming up with some little tidbits and analogies and stories that will help people move forward in what they're teaching or what they're doing. And the conferences too is not just for us professionals who are doing this all the time. It's also for
the
young
trainer
students,
or
nurses, the training, the people who are being trained to come along and say, okay, so I've always invited and paid for a number of my clients, my mentors within different organisations, so that they can come along. I also encourage each one of my organisations to pay for a mentor to come along to see what's going on. So I run a bit of a competition, and they have to send one as well. And
that's
it's very
idea.
interesting.
I like that idea.
Well, it
starts
works
to
because
expand the horizons as well.
It expands their knowledge, and they also feel as if they're included in a group that's bigger than their organisation, and they also see that there are outcomes that are meaningful, and that we're not just being ho-hum in our training. We're actually encouraging them to think outside the square, to gain more knowledge in their careers, and perhaps help them on a road to making career choices. So it works very well.
I have already invited a couple of new people this year as well. I'm hoping they'll join us.
Yeah.
You touched a little bit before on suppliers and new inventions and new equipment that's coming in, and I found that really interesting when I started getting more into manual handling, how close that relationship was with suppliers that I hadn't experienced before in physiotherapy, maybe in allied health professions. And at first I was a bit standoffish, I guess, and I thought, I don't want any of my decisions to be swayed by, any sales representative. I'm not sure I want to meet with the supplier. But very quickly I learned how much they had to offer, and started to look forward to them coming in and telling me and teaching me about some new stuff, new equipment. So I think we're in quite a unique position that way. What advice would you have to other newcomers like me when I started, who might be a bit standoffish with suppliers? Have you got any success stories of how it's helped, like designing anything new together, or?
Well, okay, yeah. I guess you know, I I I don't usually like to name
You
specific
don't have to
pieces of
name.
equipment
You don't
or
have to
anything.
name names.
Only because you know, I like to think I'm everybody's
Yes.
friend, and everybody has something to offer,
Yes.
and I'm quite happy to promote what needs to be promoted back at my workplaces. Uh,
Sure.
but again, as I said, I like to stay under the radar a bit too. Surprise, surprise. But when it comes to equipment, there was one particular standing age that came onto the market some years ago. And I remember seeing it and thinking, this is fantastic, but gee, it needs tweaking. It needs a lot of tweaking. And working with the supplier as well as other people were, and this is something I actually initially saw in the UK. And when I came back and found that we could get the similar product, then basically said the tweaking's got to happen, otherwise we won't use it. It's just too channeled into one direction for one type of client. So they made those changes based on everybody's input. And lo and behold, we got back something that was far greater, capable and more flexible to a number of different people, not just one channeled client. So I've worked with people on many different products in relation to giving my thoughts and opinions, which obviously I'm one of those people who can't shut up when it comes to I've got an opinion. But doesn't mean they have to take it.
You're not backwards in coming forwards, Pippa.
No, not when I'm passionate about something, no. But, you know, there's things out there at the moment which I feel quite saddened because there has become a mindset about certain aspects of equipment that people think, oh, they're banned or they're this, or you can't use them. And I'm thinking,
like a fixed way of thinking about it.
You're too tunnel vision, and you know the accreditation teams have a lot to answer with some of the aspects of the equipment that we can and can't use. It seems to me people blame the equipment before they blame the users, and I think that is so unjust. And so I work a lot with suppliers in giving them ideas of how they can promote a product to do something that obviously I want.
Yeah, that works. That you can see
that works. Yes, and you know, to promote it in a way that even if just speaking about it differently. And, you know, you can pick a salesman who has no idea of what they're selling, but just has a spiel that they go through. But people coming to the conference for the first time need to be able to engage with the supplier, ask the dumbest of questions and still get a good answer from the supplier. And I believe that that is indicative of a good supplier who knows their product and knows what they're dealing with. And they all move around. They go from one mob to another mob, and eventually they get such a good understanding of what works well and what doesn't, but also always willing to try and enhance their products too and take back feedback. And I think that's very important.
Yeah, it's quite a like a powerful alliance that we can influence the industry, and we can help create new products to help people.
And the fact that they will share their products at a site, I know things have changed in so much as, you know, you can't do wet trials and so forth, but basically when you want to share a product with an organisation that perhaps has a negative viewpoint initially based on someone else's opinion, then they are quite happy to share the equipment and to, you know, as in trials and so forth. And some people, gosh, I remember putting the first black box onto a bed 25 years ago to stop it from, you know, the crank,
I remember
which
that.
everybody was wrecking their shoulders.
The manual bed lift.
And we put yes, and we put, even before the winders, and we put the black box, electric black box on so that at least it came up and down. And I remember thinking, this is exciting.
Revolutionary.
Was. because no one else had really done it, but we worked with a group that was willing to give it a go. And lo and behold, the next thing we know, everybody's got electric beds, and I'm sure there's more in the history than that. But yeah, I felt really privileged to be there when the first electric head of the bed started.
That's a cool story.
Yeah, it's gone back a while.
Yeah, yeah.
And from then on, anything was possible. Anything was possible. I remember when beds didn't even have wheels.
God, yeah, it's exciting to to be able to influence change.
I've seen a lot of change. Yeah, I've seen a lot of change. I don't know how much I've actually influenced, but I'm sure a lot of other people have influenced more. But
collectively, we can all pitch in there and
absolutely
contribute to that.
And I'm quite humbled actually by how far we've gone in the industry. Still got a long way to go, and every now and again we drop a little backwards in relation to the ball gets dropped sometimes. And it shouldn't all be about injury ratios. It should be, hey, we're on a winning streak, let's keep it going. Let's think outside the square and make it even easier. I mean, being in Japan this year, I was hopeful to see a lot of robotics and so forth. I heard a lot about it. I spoke to the professors about it, but I didn't actually see any robotics yet. No, but there's promise. Not that I want to turn into a robot. Have my job done by a robot.
Care robots, that could be part of your other future predictions in the crystal
well, be
ball.
careful. There are care robots, but they're little fluffy things that talk to you.
I remember hearing about that the last conference. We got time for one more question. You've got so much energy, Pippa, and you've done so much in your career. How do you keep your energy up and your motivation to push on? There's a lot of, barriers and resistance things come up in this industry. What keeps you going?
Basically,
if you're listening to
I smile until it hurts.
If you're listening to the audio only, I'm looking at a picture of Pippa on my screen with a giant smile, and she's stretching her smile from ear to ear.
Yes. Strong head bones, so I touch my skull so many times to a wall, sometimes from head banging, yes. But I generally just smile and think, hey, let's just move on, let's move forward. And, I can be quite a strong person in my argument sense, and I have been told that I can tend to take over sometimes. But honestly, I only do it when I have to, because it's not going in the channel that we wanted to occur, and that, and walking regularly, physical exercise, keeping myself healthy and fit. I guess
keeps you going.
When I get really cross and the head banging is starting to hurt, I go for a very long walk through the bush. And I'm very lucky I live up here in the bush. So, it's one of those things that keeps me sane. Yeah. I always tell people, if you have a confrontation with someone, or if someone doesn't agree with the way forward, not so much because you say so, but because they're giving all these obstacles and barriers in front, I always say, take a few deep breaths, go for a walk around the block, come back and start again, and just keep plugging away. I have used so many different doors to get in to get what we need, that I've lost count. There's always a way to fix it, and when there's not a way to fix it, you have to turn around and say, well, is it me? Is it the organisation? Or is it just the way it is? And that's right. And we're just not there yet. There's more to be done.
You have been listening to the Manual Handling Collective podcast. If you're only listening through audio, we've also filmed this episode. If you want to see a little extra, see the link in the show notes. Subscribe to stay notified of future episodes. Like, share, comment, and get in touch to hear more of what you want. If you know a guest who'd be a great fit for the show, just let me know.